excited to introduce you to Mike Harrington, who is the National Sales Training Manager at Boston Beer Company. Mike has been with Boston Beer for 15 years in positions like brewery representative, district sales manager, regional sales trainer, and now he manages the divisional sales training team. So welcome, Mike. We're so excited to have you here today, and I will pass things off to you.
First thing I wanted to talk about with everybody is what we call the hierarchy of salespeople. This is from Sales and Marketing magazine in like 1993, which is still relevant, believe it or not. But the whole idea here is that this is all about from a buyer's perspective, right? How do I perceive certain types of salespeople? And I'm not going to give you a million examples here, but at the bottom of this hierarchy, you have the order taker. You don't see a ton of value in an order taker if you're a buyer. There's somebody who comes in, they ask for the order, they leave, and that's it, right? Not adding a ton of over-the-top value outside of just taking people. Now, as you work up this hierarchy, becoming another sales rep, my sales rep, you're getting a little bit more skill, you're adding a bit more value, you're probably building some relationship, and then ultimately, your goal as any salesperson, and I say salesperson air quotes here, but like anybody who's making a presentation, you want to be perceived as a partner. You want to be perceived as a consultant. And if you think about it, that's what businesses do when they need advice. They bring in some third-party consultant to come in because they're credible and have a past track record of success, and say, hey, I need help with something. Like, take a look at how we do things and give us some feedback. That's where you want to get to. Now, what I'll say about this is like, for many of you on this call, you're an order taker. And that's okay, because it takes a little bit of time of working with a customer to work your way sort of up the hierarchy. And then when I say a little bit of time, that might be a sales call, that might be months, that might be years, depending on the industry that you're in. But ultimately, just knowing where you stand is important, because it will help you from a prep standpoint to think about what's the nature of the sales call that I'm about to make, and what do I need to do to sort of position myself in front of the buyer in a way that I can come off as credible as possible. The way that we kind of talk about it is that those folks at the bottom, you're kind of living in your own world. And you're living in your own world in that you don't really understand a lot about how the buyer makes decisions. You're just kind of focused on your own product. As you start to think about how to get into the buyer's world, by asking things like questions, right? That's how you can start to sort of work your way up to that consultant level of this hierarchy. So for persuasion, and I think we had some good answers, persuading is the ability to convince somebody based on facts, reasoning, and logic. Facts, reasoning, and logic, which would make sense, right? Most of us, when we're thinking about making a purchase of some sort, rely on certain sets of facts or reasoning or logic or need that sort of leads us to the thing that we're going to buy, right? Now, the question for everybody is this, and again, you can just kind of like nod or shake your head. Do you always buy things based on facts, reasoning, and logic? No, of course not, right? So everybody here has probably made a impulse position with their gut, or just like felt a certain way about something, and that's what drove them to make a certain decision. That happens all the time, and that's sort of the flip side of persuasion. Persuasion is rational, and when people act rationally, persuasion works really, really well. Now, if you click to the next slide, that brings me to influence, and I think some of the people in the chat like really were getting to this. This is more so about the relationship that you've built with somebody, or like your ability to communicate while building rapport and sort of demonstrating credibility. So influence is more about how folks feel about the thing that they're trying to sell. And I saw somebody earlier in the chat mentioned like politicians, I think when I asked about strategy. And like, if you think about that, by the way, I'm not getting into politics right now, don't worry about that. But when you think about who gets a vote over somebody else, it's very rarely their thought on like, and their position on infrastructure that changes the voter's mind. The voter just feels a certain way about the person that they're voting for, right? And a lot of that is because of influence. It's your ability to kind of connect with somebody. It's your ability to kind of build your own credibility based on how you communicate, based on how you do business. And both of these things, persuasion and influence, are incredibly important. And actually, if you hit the next slide, as it relates to influence, I've worked with Brewing the American Dream in a number of different capacities, a lot over the last, I don't know, call it 8-9 years. And I think the one thing that everybody on this call should feel supremely confident about is your own ability to authentically show enthusiasm and passion for the product that you're selling, for the business that you've started, for the program that you have, because it's what brought you here in the first place, right? This is the number one selling tool that everybody on the call has. So for all the stuff that I'm going to talk about over the next few minutes, and it's important and it will help you out for sure, this is it. This is the secret sauce that you all have versus competition that you can use to differentiate yourself because you mean it, because you authentically mean it, because you authentically care. And is like and it doesn't mean that you need to be like over the top crazy enthusiastic, but if you can do it in an authentic way that's you, that shows the passion that you have for the products that you sell, that is the thing that's going to resonate most. That is how you influence people and you really drive a connection with them. This brings me to the proposal. And the two things that we're going to talk about right now. First is the proposal, and then we're going to get into probing. When I say proposal, this just means a sales presentation. Like, okay, I've introduced myself, I've let them know what I'm there to talk about. Now I'm going to make a sales proposal. And there's 3 elements to any effective sales proposal. Not just like at the Boston Beer Company, but like anybody who sells anything, anywhere, when they make a proposal, if it's effective, it has these 3 things: features, benefits, and evidence. And what we're going to do in this section, I think really for all of you, is give you a chance to kind of reflect on the products and services that you are selling and what those key features are. A feature is a fact, function, or unique characteristic of a product, program, or service. Layman's terms, this is just the thing that is cool about your product or your program, the differentiating factors of what you have versus the competition. That's a feature. Other examples of features, again, for beer, it's kind of simple. It's like the ingredients, the taste profile, the aroma, etc., right? But it could be all of this, and this really goes for all of your products and services, right? So, you know, if you are competing in a segment where there's a lot of sales history, then obviously how your product ranks in terms of that category or segment is going to be important. But as you get more sort of in depth and really get to understand sort of the folks that you're selling to, you'll start to realize how much do they care about how unique the product is, how much variety or quality and freshness, how important these factors are. One of the things, second from the bottom there, service and education. The fact that you exist, you are a feature of the product that you are selling. Your ability to go in and educate folks on the quality of your program, or like the quality of your product, and basically train them, educate them to sell it on your behalf when you're not there, that is huge. Salespeople are unbelievably good at rattling off features. They can tell you everything about their product or their service that makes it great in their opinion. So the key to a proposal is not just like rattling off all of the things that you believe are advantages of the product, but tying them to a tangible benefit to the buyer. So when we say features and benefits, the benefit, it's the reason for the person that you're selling to buy. It's the overall value of the thing that you're selling, of your proposal. And it's ultimately that favorable result. If you were to bring in the product, here's what it would mean to you. Now, for us sort of here on this, call, using things like, this feature and this benefit and what it means to you, like it might sound a little dorky or a little canned, and I totally get that. But when you don't tie benefits to features, you really are doing yourself a disservice, because it sounds phony. It sounds like you're totally just living in your world and not really connecting sort of the feature to the benefit. The way to kind of think about this is, which means to you. You don't have to say that, but this is an example of sort of what we call a conversion phrase. It's the way that you connect features and benefits so that you can say them like an ordinary person and not come off like a robot, right? I know that I've seen people who will use different phrases such as like, hey, in your world, what this means is this, or, by doing this, what the benefit to you could be is this. But just finding something that feels normal, I think, is important for all of us on this call. Do you know how to tie your feature and a benefit in a way that, again, connects sort of the overall value to the person that you're selling? This whole questions are our single most powerful selling tool is correct. I mentioned the whole authentic enthusiasm, passion thing. That's probably 1A. Probing is probably 1B. And I think to the question that we just had, you don't get a ton of time in a sales call. So it's not like you can ask every question under the sun. But if you can identify and prioritize 2 to 3 questions every time you make a sales call and learn 1 or 2 new things about that buyer or that business that you didn't know, you're putting yourself in a much better position to get things done. The way that we talk about probing is that it's like a funnel. And basically think about starting super open-ended up top and then getting more specific as you go. Just a quick example, discovery questions are questions that usually sound like, can you tell me a little bit about how you make decisions about X? So in my world, in Boston Beer world, I'm walking into a bar, hey, tell me a little bit about how you make decisions on draft. Tell me a little bit about how you make decisions on, specials for your menu. Tell me a little bit about how often you make certain decisions and when those decisions are but very big open-ended questions. Developmental questions are saying things like, hey, you mentioned this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I hear that often where I'm like, hey, you mentioned, what your customers are asking for. Talk to me a little bit more about that. Like, give me an example of the last thing that your customers really liked and what you brought up. And clarifying questions are just like, it sounds to me like this, and this is important. Is that correct? So this whole process, and it's rare that it just kind of follows a nice, neat, even funnel like this in real life, but by following sort of this approach, tell me kind of big picture about how folks make decisions, what we call reflective listening. You mentioned this, tell me more about that, and clarifying questions. It really does show the buyer that you're listening, number one, and that you care. It will also help you fact find, because discovery questions, they're relatively short, but they're going to elicit a very, very wide-ranging response depending on the question that you ask. So general to specific, and encourage sort of elaborative responses. That's the key to asking really thoughtful questions. To wrap this all up, sort of overall key takeaways, hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, even if just 1 or 2 of these little things is helpful for you, that's great. But from a selling skill standpoint, really thinking about questions. In many cases related to those red flags. But am I asking questions? Do I have a firm grip on what my features are? Am I tying them to benefits? Which means to you? Find that phrase that connects the features and benefits. And then lastly, this whole idea of enthusiasm and passion. I said it once, I'll say it again. This is the secret sauce for everybody on this call. This is why you will be successful in the products that you're selling, is because you have your own story. So lean into that and make sure that you don't gloss over that. And I think those are the things that will really help you to connect with and hopefully really raise your credibility with the buyers that you call.
Thank you all for being here, for taking time out of your day. Thanks again to Mike for those awesome presentations. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.